Hello again, my friends, and welcome back to Carpo's channel. That's me. Today's topic is really about understanding people. And out of all the videos I make, the most important ones to me are when I am actually trying to share something that's beneficial, that I think is beneficial, mind you, in my little world that I have, my little bubble. I am not ashamed to acknowledge that I live in my own reality and that most people do. What's amazing to me is really that other people refer to how others agree with them, or, well, so and so agrees with me, but as if that matters, because people have different opinions, and really the opinions are based on so many factors. But we make a lot of assumptions about people, a lot of assumptions about each other. And I was going to make this video a few days back. I just generally let ideas float around in my head. But it was regarding comments I've had over the years on YouTube and just what it teaches me about people's assumptions. But also, even talking with people in person and speaking with friends, relatives, you end up with the same assumptions that people assume you mean a certain thing. And it took me back to a time back in the mid 2000s when I was working in construction. And someone said something about I assumed that this was this. And it was on a job site as a carpenter. And we were remodeling a lake house, and it took us about 2 years. And there were a lot of different little, it wasn't a straight through job. It was very complicated and a lot involved. And I learned a hell of a lot on that job site. But the one thing about carpenters is they're very witty. The old school carpenters, even the snide contractors, they're smart guys. They may be assholes, but they're smart guys. And what I mean by smart is not book smarts or even street smarts, but wisdom. And wisdom is what I learned was important. And that wisdom is those little old sayings that they know every single one of. And I remember somebody saying something about making an assumption, and the boss, who was this 60-year-old guy named Gary, and he looks over and he goes, "You know what assuming does, right? It makes an ass out of you and me." And I don't want to explain a joke, but obviously most of you probably got it. Assume, as you spell it out, is ass, you, me. Assume. And I just thought that was the greatest thing ever. And that stuck with me for the last 15 years, And I continuously use that. And it's because it's so damn true. Assuming other people's intentions is how we get totally screwed over. And so I want to, before I go any further, I'd like to say Happy Earth Day. It is April 22nd, 2022. So it's 4/22/22. That's kind of cool too. Numbers are numbers, multiples of 2. But I have a fond history with Earth Day as well as 420, which, to be honest, this was the first year I didn't even go to the weed store. I totally missed it. I really smoked like one little bowl on 420, and I didn't even really get stoned. I was like, wow, I kind of, I've kind of ceased to smoke the amount of cannabis I used to, and it's not as interesting to me. And that's funny because that goes right in line with the video I want to make about assumptions about drugs that people have. And that's what I was going to talk about on 420, but I never made the video. But I really like to make drug videos talking about harm reduction as well as what I've learned, but I feel awkward doing it now. I thought back to when I used to make videos about drugs and how shameless it was, and now I feel like I don't want to influence any young people to do something stupid. But at any rate, back to Earth Day before I go any further. Earth Day is a kind of a, I don't know, it's funny because that ties into what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes about, global warming versus the belief that cycles are natural. All these things are important. But I wanted to say first, before I forget, happy birthday, Scoey. Scoey, I love you, man. You're a good bro, and you mean a lot to me as a friend. And I want to say this to all my friends and family who may be watching. I care. about what you think. I care about how you feel. And I have a hard time sometimes. Damn it, I'm getting a phone call while I'm making my video from New York. I've been getting these every day, 2 in a row. Totally separate story, but I wish it would fuck off. I'm going to decline it. Um, I don't know anybody in New York. So Scoey has been a good friend of mine since we were kids, probably 1989 to 90, 91, late 80s to early 90s. He was about 11 or 12. I was about 14, 15. We met through my younger brother, who was 3 years younger, and he was in his age group. And you all know how it is when you're young. If somebody's 12 and somebody's 15, that's like a world away, right? But he would always sell us weed, and he would sell us these pinched bags. So we'd buy eighths that were probably already short, maybe 3 grams or less. Then he'd pinch a few nugs for himself and end up selling us these 2.5 gram bags for $40. So thanks, Scoey. No, I'm totally kidding. He did what he had to do. He would stick it in this pipe across the street in this construction site, in one of those PVC pipes along a chain link fence that closed off the construction site. So the pipe was just put over the chain so you could see it. And he would tuck it in there, and he'd tuck the $40 in there, take the weed, and yeah. Can't complain about weed, even if it was a ripoff back then. Early 90s was a weird time for stoners, but we had some really good shit. So, anyway, that's my discussion about 420. I had to throw that in there. And I love you, Scoey. You're an awesome bro. And also the rest of my friends, you know. I'm not going to name all of my friends because that would just mean some friend I would forget, and they would say, "Why the fuck did you forget me, man?" So, here's where I'm coming from today. As Earth Day, to finalize that discussion, I feel like a lot of the Earth Day stuff is kind of navel-gazing, and it falls in line with the George Carlin skit from back in the 90s. He's like talking about how the Earth's not going anywhere. The people are. He's like, everybody's got a cause. Save the bees, save the trees, save the whales, save the snails. And that's his skit. And I was like, it's kind of like, oh, come on, we have to care about the environment. But there's nothing I can argue with in that discussion. It's a nihilist attitude, but one that I have come to understand in my years. I'm not an environmentalist, but I'm not a humanist. But I want to be somewhere in the middle. And what I mean by that is, for all humans living on Earth to live a comfortable life, we are going to have to damage the environment. You can't jump to green energy tomorrow and expect things to be fine. Solar panels, windmills, all this. I've had these debates with people. I've looked it up. I want to know the data. I know that there are rare earth element pits in China that are just totally toxic. People suffering from radiation poisoning from the water to make windmills, and you just can't win. And that's what leads people to cynicism and nihilism. And because of that, you start to wonder about selfishness. Should I just live my life? Not worry about what other people need? Well, of course not, because they're your neighbors. But it comes to more complicated issues like, should I care about what the future needs? Should I care about my great-grandchildren? Do I know if a comet's going to hit the Earth in a week and we're all fucked anyway? It allows people to have many different viewpoints on life. And so therefore, we don't really know the full breadth of what a person believes or thinks or understands without asking them. And that brings me to today's topic, which had nothing to do with any of that, but that was kind of the preamble to get there. We are selfish naturally because Earth and the universe is selfish. Everything is for the self. Why would you sacrifice your well-being for a universal truth when you know that you're conscious, but you can't prove the Earth is conscious or the universe is aware? Like, we have to think these things through philosophically to the point where our brains can explode sometimes, which leads me into who set the morals, who set the values for what you believe. And you may say, well, it's just obvious humans shouldn't kill or shouldn't harm or shouldn't do this or that. But is it really that obvious? Because I haven't found it to be the case. I'll be 47 this year. I'm still a youngin' in my mind. I still have a long way to go. I don't think that I have it all figured out by any means. I'm almost 47. I've talked to people who are 67 and 77. That's 30 years on me. That's literally a full adulthood on top of what I know. And I think that a lot of younger folks tend to point to the older generations and say, well, they just got old and stubborn and they just kind of gave up. But who's to say you won't? You know what I mean? There's a lot of inspiration out there to change things, change the way people think, change the way things are. But the truth is, it's not our place. We don't know what's right or wrong. And that leads me into the discussion about the most important component of my topic today is about not assuming about people. As I said, it makes an ass out of you and me. And I came up with my own quote earlier, and maybe you'll find it interesting, maybe you won't. Doesn't matter. I wanted something for myself. And the quote is, before you get bent, ask what they meant and gauge their intent. So before you get bent, ask what they meant, gauge their intent. That means before you get bent or angry, obviously, bent means pissed off or frustrated, ask them. Ask the person you're talking to that you're angry at what they meant by what they said that made you angry. And after they answer you, then gauge their intent. Meaning, try to figure out whether their intent was to actually hurt you or that they had a different opinion and you were hurt because you're a butthurt little whiny bitch. Male or female or whatever, non-binary, it doesn't matter. A little bitch can be any person who wants to whine about the fact that they feel slighted even when a person didn't intend to slight them. But gauging a person's intent is everything, in my opinion. If a person didn't mean to hurt your feelings, it's kind of like if you run into somebody, bump into somebody, and they turn and they're like, you're like, oh, I'm sorry, man. But the other response could be like, huh. You know, then you'll fight. There's a completely different response with people who intend something and don't. But we don't know until we ask. And as I said, this topic I wanted to talk about the other day. I'm glad I waited because a comment came through this morning that actually really summed up what I'm talking about here. Somebody left a comment on the video I made a week or two ago about pronouns and the use of pronouns. And I knew I would get a little negative feedback on that. I tried to be as rational and reasonable as possible. I'm not looking to trigger people or to tell people how to live. It's quite the opposite. I've seen that there is division and people who feel like they can't talk about certain topics because they get attacked by people from certain communities or groups. The groupthink type attitude, which allows people to dominate and believe that they are superior and have the best ideals and the best ideas and morals and values, which are very subjective. But a lot of these folks live rent-free in people's minds, so they get frustrated. That's the number one thing. Don't let people live rent-free in your mind. I have learned how to deal with frustration. Earlier, I knocked something over, a drill, when I was going out to move my guitars out. By the way, my guitars that I just finished building, I got my first bass and my first electric guitar that are totally finished. I was going to play a song later. I'll do that in a different video, but you have a little bit of pride in what you've done, and the little voices in the back of your mind, even if they're not real people, the ones saying it's not good enough, or you're not good enough, or you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know what you're talking about, those live rent-free in your head, along with any of the bullshit and the people that you meet who make a claim that you're somebody you're not. Like the people online you might meet who say you're a racist because of this, or a transphobe because of that. So, to back up, the person who had left a comment this morning left a comment regarding my pronouns video saying, he or she asked, did you really just say that heavy metal censorship in the 80s was comparable to LGBTQ rights? And I said, no, first off, I don't know where you particularly heard that in the video because I don't recall the context. But then I explained my position. And then they gave me the timestamp, like 12 minutes or something. I went back and listened to it. And at that point, I looked at the person's account, and they had just made their account today. So I thought, okay, this is weird. Is this somebody I know, somebody who already pissed off at me for some reason and trolling? But instead of accusing, I just asked, is this an account just made to harass? But also laid out my entire reasoning for what I believed. I said, it's not about what choices you make in your life. I don't care what sexuality you have any more than what religion. But it's the same way that I have nothing against Jehovah's Witnesses, but if they knock on my door, I have a right to speak about it. You see what I mean? Like, people would say live and let live when it comes to religion, but if you're knocking on my door and telling me that I'm wrong and I might go to hell, well, you're damn right I'm going to speak up, and that's how it is. So, but before I get bent, I ask what they meant and gauge their intent. And that's helped me. It really has. Don't let people or bullshit live rent-free in your mind. That's all. And really, the most frustrating thing, I think, is when people accuse others of being a certain way. And this is why I brought this up probably half dozen times, the Joe Rogan thing, because he mentioned it earlier in a podcast the other day with Duncan Trussell. Fucking love that guy. He's hilarious. And it's like Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell sitting there with like these long hair wigs on and in candlelight with like incense and shit. I mean, who knows? They were probably shrooming, but it was hilarious. I think it was done on Bicycle Day, which is actually the day that Albert Hoffman rode home on his bicycle, tripping balls on acid because LSD absorbed through his skin. He was looking for a medicine that would help his wife and other people, maybe a decongestant or something, I don't remember, but apparently he discovered LSD on accident when it spilled onto him. Then he had a dream about it later and came back and did some research on that LSD 25 molecule and ended up getting it spilled on him, and the rest is history. You wonder how much of this shit is just meant to happen, right? But at any rate, back to not letting people live rent-free in your mind. We live in a weird world. We live at a weird time where technology allows us to communicate instantly and be angry all the time, right? There's a reason I don't use Twitter. I signed up for it about 2 years ago, and I ended up completely abandoning it after I realized just how toxic it really was. So let me just finalize this. Looks like my camera actually might be running out of battery. Hopefully I can keep it charging. That's weird. Maybe if I blow out the cord, when we had Nintendos back in the day, they would say blow out the cartridge, and then I watched a debunking video that said it didn't really work, and I said bullshit. It worked for me, but it doesn't work for cords so much. So, to finalize this, I wanted to mention just a few things that people will say to you that you need to be aware of that will things that when people say to you should trigger you to just kind of walk away and not give a shit any longer. Or the things that mean that we need to define our position better. The first one is, so what you're basically saying is, that is a line that all of us have heard in our lives. So what you're saying is, no. You just stop them right there when they say that. And you back up and you say, no, not what I'm saying is. I will tell you what I'm saying, and I will explain it to you and try to word it better or differently. But do not let them troll you by saying, so you're just basically saying you're a racist or a hater or a monster, whatever it might be. No, don't buy into it. The next one is, well, it sounds like you feel like, no, that's just another assumption about how you feel. Whether you think or you feel a certain way. This would maybe fall in line with the one who says, maybe the orange man bad thing, right? If you dislike Trump, it's instantly that you're emotional. Why do people get so emotional about this? And I'm like, well, you're assuming I'm emotional because you've seen people previously who are emotional about the same thing. That's not my situation. So you just move on casually in the conversation. The last one is, you must be one of those ... This one is probably one of the most difficult to deal with. It is something that I have to honestly say that I fell in line with, actually got suckered into during the Trump era. When people would say, "Oh, all Trump supporters are deplorables," I kind of cringed because I knew that wasn't true. I wanted to know why a person would vote for Trump. So I went and I talked to people. I listened. I made videos about it and I talked about it. It was kind of cringe. It was hard for me to even discuss it because people were all emotional during that time. But in the end, I walked away with more information than I thought I would get about reasoning why a person would vote for Trump over someone else. It does make sense. I never liked Hillary. Don't get me wrong. That wasn't the point. The point is not why would people vote for him over her, but why are people so obsessed over the individual? There are many reasons. But it was never about hating people who thought a certain way. But I had plenty of friends and family who were like, all of the conservatives are idiots, all of Trump supporters are idiots, and others who would say, all the liberals are idiots, and I'd say, maybe we should have like a Trump Bernie rally, where they're one's vice president. I'm not kidding. We live in a fucking ridiculous time. We need a lot of variety. There's a reason why half the nation is one way and the other way. So people just assume that if you're politically viewed one way, then it means that you're this kind of person. And it's just not true. Don't buy into it. You need to have emotional intelligence in order to gauge these things, to understand why they happen, and to see when people are fucking with you. And here's the thing. It doesn't mean you can't get angry. It doesn't mean you can't get frustrated. Getting a little bit frustrated and angry actually builds that adrenaline within us, which makes it harder to think because we have cortisol flowing. We have this, your brain shuts down so you can fight or flight. So you have to be rational and not get angry. But when you do get angry, if you calm down first, that gives that previous frustration, which builds in our mind that we need to deal with this issue, allows us to discuss it. And there are no issues that are off topic. And I feel bad because I want to talk about bettering our lives on my channel. That's always been my real thing. And I want to figure out ways to be better people, happier people. But sometimes that means talking about the bullshit that we face because that's how we become better people, acknowledging the truth about ourselves and the world. I guess the last final notes are know where you stand on things, but also on the opposite and same token, be willing to stand somewhere else. And that means if you believe one thing one year and somebody proves you wrong, be willing to change your mind. Don't be afraid of being a flip-flopper. I'll never forget when some politician in Florida or somewhere, like 8-10 years ago probably, he flip-flopped on cannabis. People wanted to keep it illegal. He was totally against it as a conservative, and he was staunchly conservative, hardcore against drugs. And then he learned more about cannabis, and he supported the bill to legalize it. And he was interviewed by the media, and they're like, "Why'd you flip-flop? Why'd you flip-flop?" And he had a very eloquent and great explanation for why he did. He said, "I changed because I got new information." And that's how I feel all the time about politics, even about religion. At one time, I would throw a Bible out of a motel window because I was a stupid kid. Religion was dumb and I was angry about the world. Not angry, but just I didn't have any reverence for an understanding for why people believe and do what they do. And I've learned to really just let people do what they do. And I'll put it this way. I never, ever speak out against people's choices in life unless those choices affect other people who choose something different. I guarantee it. I might eat my words if somebody points out a video I made about people where it doesn't even matter, but even if I talk about religion, I've had people accusing me on the street corner of being, going to hell because of the clothes I'm wearing or because I have long hair. I've seen it all, right? I think we all have. The most important thing is to remember two things here. Who set the morals in the world, in the universe? Who chooses what the morals really are? And are you able to put on someone else's shoes and walk their path? I know you can't ever do it. I can't do it. None of us can really ever be in another person. Even if your mind was in another person, you'd be that person. You can't combine minds. Each individual is completely unique. Therefore, if somebody out there has a completely different view than you, they might be a genius in the way that you need to communicate. They might be they might completely disagree on everything political, but be a phenomenal partner for carpentry. Or they might be have a completely different career, but be great at philosophy. And what we need to do is find the connections, looking at what we can connect on, not what we butt heads on. And I firmly believe that will be our saving grace if it's possible. So I should go now. Thank you for listening. My name is Carpo. Thank you for visiting my channel. I have another channel called Carpo's Complaints where I haven't used it in a bit, but trying not to complain these days. I also have one called, a couple different YouTube channels. They're in the link. You can check it out. And if you're new to the channel, check out my podcast on all platforms, Spotify, everywhere. It's called 15-Minute Free Thinking, and I have a whole lot of stuff on there and a little more controversial topics. And on a final note, I also now build guitars. I'm a carpenter, so I have Carpo Craft guitars and a Carpo Craft channel on YouTube as well. And let's see, is that all the self-promotion I got? That's about it. Gotta have some. Oh, wait, one more. Patreon. For extra content, as well as I'm going to eventually do some music giveaways. I think my long-term goal is going to be to give away a guitar to someone. It might not be one of the top-of-the-line guitars, but I've been building guitars. I have one behind me over here, which is based on an ESP, and I'm pretty excited about this thing. It's got a couple of nice humbuckers in there. I need to order the rest of the knobs because I lost the knobs, but, you know. Anyway, it works, and I'm pretty stoked on it. Just finished it earlier, and this one has a resin in the head of it. It's a maple neck with a mahogany body with maple in the center of it, and some Purple Heart. So you see, it works. And I know that doesn't seem very surprising to people who have never built a guitar, but to get all the frets to work properly, along with the nut and the bridge and the body shape and all these things, it was a huge undertaking. So I on a final note about gauging people's intent and about listening to other people's bullshit, also have faith in yourself. If somebody tells you you can't do something, just prove them wrong. Not for the sake of proving them wrong, but for the sake of proving yourself that you can do something. And that, to me, I think is the most important thing. We need to feel like we've accomplished something in this world. I think sometimes having kids is enough. Oh my God. But at any rate, I'll talk to you all next time. And I think I covered basically all the random stuff that I wanted to, and another day of random topics. Don't let other people gaslight you. I guess I haven't used that word yet. Don't let other people gaslight you. And gaslighting is simply convincing you you're crazy. It's, for those who aren't aware of the real definition, it would be like if a husband cheated on his wife and she found out, confronted him, and he told her she was just crazy. That's like the most basic, thing. Say, oh, you're just paranoid, and made her think that she was the one who was the lunatic. We get a lot of this online by sociopaths who want to convince you that what you believe is wrong. And what I want to say is, don't let other people tell you what you believe. So never forget. My little message: before you get bent, ask what they meant and gauge their intent. Wise words from a great 47-year-old. Am I 47 yet? Shit. I think I'm 46. Talk to you next time. Be well.